Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. I, of course, am your host, Nick, and it's Wednesday, which means we are back with a Matt Loss special after, you know what, Matt, a bit of a hiatus during the Club World Cup. You obviously took a little time to yourself, which I think was a smart move, and of course, we were chasing the team around America for a large part of the tournament. But how are you doing?
Yeah, good. I wasn't off. I was working, but yeah, I needed to be at home. Lots going on with my kids and leaving primary school and all sorts of things. So yeah, stuff I didn't really want to miss out on. I kept abreast of things as much as I could of the Club World Cup, though. Obviously, interesting times.
Interesting times, and you're talking about the world champions again. It's a weird. I mean, look, I think we talked a little bit before the tournament. We were pretty candid that this was very experimental. It was, potentially as a tournament, uh, ill-timed, especially when you consider the World Cup next year and all the responsibilities the players have had in one season. You saw a tournament that really was hard fought and well competed. There were no, I think there were a couple of matches that went pretty sideways, but by
Yeah.
and large, they were mostly competitive. A few upsets in there. South American teams doing well, Brazilian teams in particular. What did you make of the tournament before we dive into Chelsea and the expectations?
I'm torn on it. I still don't love it. I'm not trying to diminish any. I don't want anything I say to diminish what Chelsea did at all.
No.
This isn't to do with that. I still have my reservations about the timing of it. I still have my reservations about the competitive advantage it can give certain clubs for historic success, which I don't think is great for ongoing competitiveness in various league championships. But then there are some good things about it as well. I mean, clearly the South American teams brought a lot. Like you say, I think it surprised me that it was more competitive than I thought it was going to be, if I'm honest with you. I expected to see, I think we saw a lot of slow-paced matches because of the heat, but I expected to see some matches that really looked like friendlies and didn't see too much of that. The crowds picked up generally after a bit of a kind of false start on the crowds as well. So I'm torn on it, but I still have a lot of reservations on the whole in terms of what it does for football and where it lies in the football landscape. But like I say, none of that is reflective of what I think about Chelsea's achievement in winning it. And fair play to them, because it was a year in the planning for Chelsea. You know, I was speaking to people last summer while I was away at the Euros in Germany, and it kept getting referenced that the squad building was with a view to playing the 5 tournaments it would be with the Club World Cup, and that this was very much being factored in. I've got to say, when I was listening to it last summer, I was kind of thinking, this is a bit bonkers. You know, squad planning for the Club World Cup just seems mad. You know, at that stage, we didn't even really know what the competition looked like, but they've taken it very, very seriously, and fair play, because it's paid off, financially and sporting wise.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the sporting side. In segment 2 of this, we'll talk about the finances and the implications there. But the sporting side was, look, just being there on Sunday in particular, remarkable to watch. I mean, this PSG side, for my money, is the best team in the world, even though we just smacked them pretty hard. They have played a tremendous amount of football this season. They played a lot of really, really good teams off the park. And Chelsea were able to take it to them after a really slow start to the tournament. Chelsea were not very good in the group stages, a little sluggish. But the minute that the knockouts picked up, Chelsea really started to really advance their football and play much better. What did you make of the final in particular before we kind of move on to the other stuff?
Well, I'm annoyed because my team Villa used to hold the trophy for team that gave the best effort against PSG for our home victory in the Champions League. And our fans treated that a bit like a trophy, of a badge of honour, that we gave this lot a game and gave them a scare. And now you've mercilessly swiped that off us and made it look like a terrible achievement. So my first emotion is anger. But no, in all seriousness, I was astonished. When they went 3-0 up at half time, and they were good for it as well. You know, it was absolute tactical masterclass. They exposed a weakness that no one else had really properly found or exposed on Mendes. They had the Sanchez long balls down that side and just worked an absolute treat. And I was astonished. And I almost put a message on social media, but I thought better of it because sometimes you put these things out there and you quickly get a response where you think, okay, I should have thought about this more. But as I was watching, I was thinking, I can't remember the last time I saw Chelsea play this well. Like, for me, the performance was better than the performance in the 2021 Champions League final. You can make arguments why it would be different because
much
you can
different.
say exactly, and that's kind of why I didn't put it out there because you can start all kinds of arguments. But the manner of the performance, I was just like reaching into my memory, trying to think, when did I last see a performance as sort of breathtaking as this from a Chelsea team? Struggling to think of one, to be honest with you. And I mean, the first half was just absolutely astonishing. And then they actually could have got them a couple of times on the break and made it a really, really incredible scoreline. But I thought they were fairly comfortable second half. You know, I thought half-time, few players on yellow cards. Referee was shambolic, by the way. Chelsea beat PSG and the referee that night. Mm-hmm. Well, that night in England, should I say, because the referee was just booking everyone he could on the Chelsea team. So I kind of thought, well, there is the opportunity that there might be an early red card in the second half, and if PSG get one early doors, it could get dicey. But they had a little spell at the first 5 minutes of the second half, but after that, I thought Chelsea were comfortable. Remarkable success from Maresca and his tactics, and also the players carrying it out. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Maresca because I know you put out a little bit of commentary on Maresca, and I think his growth in this tournament, in particular, really the growth since February. If you go back, I mean, Chelsea lost a couple of matches due to red cards recently, but have been on a very good run of form. You know, beat Liverpool, beat Forest at the end of the year, beat PSG in this tournament, beat Benfica soundly, even though that game went to extra time unnecessarily. But one thing that you saw was Maresca change his approach in the Club World Cup, right? It went away from the 4-2-3-1. It went to this more kind of fluid tactical setup using different players in different positions, trying to free up Cole Palmer, which worked a treat in the final, obviously, but started to really work in the knockout stages. You know, we were talking in the match review, like, you know, when we first saw this tactical setup against Flamengo, like we were in the stands. I was wearing my Nicolas Jackson jersey in the stands in the Flamengo section. It was brutal, and we were terrible that day. It was a really poor performance. But to go from that to what you saw in the final in the course of 5 matches is tremendous growth for this team.
It is, but I think part of that is also influenced by the fact that players had this weird, like, sort of 1 week break between the season, the Premier League season ending and this starting. And I think a bit like you see with some of the June international games, it lends itself to then a bit of a slow start. Players, I think, struggle to after one. I've spoken to players about this before, and they actually, a lot of them will say, I feel better coming back after 3 weeks off than I do after 1 week off, because 1 week you just start to sort of relax and you're asked to go again and you never properly relax. And in your head, mentally, it's quite hard to get yourself going again, players always say. Whereas 3 weeks, you've sort of been through the cycle almost and come out the other end. So I think that probably contributed to a slow start. But also Maresca, what I would really praise Maresca for, aside from his just general tactics, which I'm sure we'll talk about, his rotation of the squad has been flawless. Like the minutes, if you see, you know, if you add João Pedro to it, they had a 29-man squad out there. That's a massive squad. But if you look at the way he rotated the minutes and managed to keep people involved, even just with substitute appearances and things, I think he managed the squad superbly. And his management of the squad in the first half of the Premier League season was something I was unsure on. I wasn't convinced it was paying off brilliantly because he'd done this whole A team, B team thing through the first bit of the Conference League and the Premier League season. And I thought that was contributing to the sort of mid-season dip at one point. But then this second half of the season, the way he's managed minutes and the way he's used his squad in the Premier League, the Conference League, and now the Club World Cup, I really feel that is an area of massive growth for him. I really feel that he has come on so much as a coach in terms of how he's managed that squad. And I think that it was no better summed up than in this tournament, and how I struggle to use the word fresh, but how he kept them going and to arrive in the final what looked like the best possible condition. You're worried that they get to the final and maybe look knackered, particularly playing a team who are so possession dominant normally. And actually, it was the other way around. PSG looked a bit knackered. And the way Chelsea started that game, they were just straight into them and set a tone. And it can't be coincidence. It must be what they've been doing in training. It must be to do with the way he's managed minutes. He had them arrive at the right time. And I do think it's his biggest area of growth as a coach that we've seen this season, his management of the squad and minutes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I think the new tactical setup for me is like, I think it's an evolution. I think it shows maturity from him as a manager to not stick to the thing that wasn't working as well and to evolve into something that had the possibility of working better, even if it was going to be a little clunky in its inception. And look, I mean, 2 finals, 7 goals between them for both, the Conference League final, which you can, take with whatever grain of salt, and against PSG, who, despite the tournament not being necessarily like the most long-standing in the world, is still an incredible team to beat. I think there's been a lot of like, hey, let's use the players in positions in which they can succeed and build a structure that way instead of build a structure that they have to force fit into. That's been my interpretation.
I mean, he did come across very stubborn at one point in the season. I mean, the biggest example of it is the quote, obviously, about Robert Sanchez, when he said about earlier in the season, if he'll kick it long, I'll drop him. We get to the Club World Cup final playing what we all think is the best team in the world, probably. And clearly the tactic is for Robert Sanchez to hit it long down the channel on Mendes. And his distribution actually with those long balls was absolutely superb. And it worked a treat as well. And that obviously shows a big difference because, Maresca it didn't look like he would be prepared to do that earlier in the season. As you say, he's been flexible within the same sort of system in terms of how the front 3 or front sort of 4 and things have looked. He's used Cole very intelligently. He's not just been left to always be number 10. I mean, moving him out to the right, obviously, in the final was another tactical piece of genius. He definitely has evolved, and he definitely just seems to become a bit less stubborn. It was very, very stubborn at one stage, and he seemed almost like it's me versus everyone else. Like, what do fans know? What do the press know? What does anyone know? And that narrative has sort of softened now, and he seems to be far more setting his team up in terms of the challenge that's ahead of them. And clearly that's worked well. And I'm glad to see it. And, Sanchez has probably been one of the biggest beneficiaries of that because I thought he had generally a good end to the season as well. And he's just looked far less jittery without having to play that Maresca style.
Yeah, I mean, Sanchez, deserves a ton of credit for the way that he played in the final, and he outplayed Donnarumma by a pretty significant margin. I look at Maresca in particular, and there was a joy about him post-Conference League final. I think there was some nervousness, and that would be expected, right? It's a final. He wants to win it. I think there's just some built up, the way the Premier League season ends, Chelsea get into the top 4, get to the Conference League final. There was almost like a joy that he exhibited. I go back to the Benfica game that goes into extra time, and Chelsea put 3 there, and he's running up and down the sidelines and celebrating with them. And then you saw kind of the beaming pride that he had at the end of this PSG game, with a lot of his players, despite the post-game scuffle, which we'll talk about here in a second. It seems like there's maybe just the blood pressure went down a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a little bit more fun being had at, summer camp, if you will, with this team.
Well, clearly qualifying for the Champions League is a big part of that. He was stressed at one stage last season. We went through that ridiculous spell where is he aiming for the Champions League? Isn't he aiming for the Champions League? Oh, yes, he is aiming for the Champions League from about March onwards. And he seemed stressed at that stage, and it was clear, and it's fair enough. But the the enormity of the situation and trying to qualify for the Champions League, knowing that that was the club's goal, clearly put a stress on his shoulders. But then he managed through that brilliantly. Chelsea's end of the season was superb. And he had that strange quote at the end of the Forest game after they qualified, which I'm sure fans liked, when he basically said all their critics could F off. But I thought at the time it was a strange way to celebrate getting in the Champions League, of kind of setting yourself up against people again. But clearly that was just part of the stress. But ever since that moment, since he's got past that moment and the conference, and then the Conference League final, and then this, it seems to have just like taken it back down a level. And as you say, he seems to have actually embraced it and enjoyed it more than sort of being stressed out by it or fighting people over it. I mean, fighting people externally like media or fans he doesn't think are on his side or critics or whatever. And that seems to have gone. So that there definitely has been some sort of relaxation and enjoyment. And you can see it with the way he's on the touchline. He's celebrating in, like you say, kind of a way where you can see he's enjoying it rather than just kind of celebrating, letting off steam.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been evident. I mean, I've been watching it from afar, obviously, but it's been evident watching it from afar.
Can we just quickly mention the end of the game scuffle that happens here? I mean,
I still don't really know what it was all about.
The video is pretty clear, and like there was an initial conversation, I think, between Nkunku, Joao Pedro, and a couple of PSG players, and then it really kicks off for reasons that don't complete. There's no like pure angle on like what the original argument was about, but then Luis Enrique gets involved, and it's pretty clearly like the aggressor in the moment against Joao Pedro. He tries to choke him. He kind of hits out at him. It's nothing like the most forceful punch you've ever seen in your life.
It's kind of more like push in the face, isn't it?
It's very strange, but like, what are we looking at here with the post? Do you think that there's anything that happens with this from like a FIFA discipline perspective?
It's a tricky one because FIFA can ban Enrique, but it'd only be in FIFA jurisdiction. So
right.
I don't think he would be banned for any domestic games or any Champions League games. So he'd only be banned were he to manage again in a FIFA game. So obviously he's already been Spain manager once, and the Club World Cup's not for another 4 years. So I mean, he'll be banned at the start of the next Club World Cup, and manager reigns would suggest he won't be PSG manager then, just because how many managers last 4 years these days. So it's an odd one. It's an odd one of where it leaves it. I'd have thought maybe it would be more appropriate to fine him, because then if you fine him, he does actually have to serve some sort of punishment, whereas it feels like a suspension. It'll be a suspension he never really has to serve. It was very, very odd. I found the whole thing very odd. I still haven't really been told a very good explanation of how it all occurred. It felt like Enrique thought something was going on between Pedro and Donnarumma, came in to sort of defend his guy, and then went way over the top and just lost it for like 10 seconds or something. It felt, reading and listening to his words after the match and the press conferences, it felt like he'd very much sort of calmed back down and probably realised he'd done something slightly ridiculous, because he tried to play it all down quite a lot. There was no sense of anger left there. He just lost it. He just absolutely lost it. This is a guy who's seen his team sweep all aside all season. I think probably there was a scenario where he saw that they might have lost, but that wouldn't have been being played, I wouldn't say played off the park as such, but sort of so soundly beaten as they were. I think he might have thought, we could lose by them parking the bus and winning 1-0 or a fluke, a lucky win. I just don't think he'd have seen it coming that Chelsea would have beaten them in such a sound way. And also, he won't have liked being done tactically by Maresca, let's face it. He was given an absolute going over by Maresca in that game. Maresca did a complete number on him, and it obviously didn't like it much. And he's just lost it. He's just lost it. As you say, it wasn't like a punch. It was kind of a push in the face. I struggle to get too angry about it. It's just one of those things, a bit like, what on earth just happened there? Why did that happen? Rather than like, oh my God, this guy should be banned forever. I think he probably deserves a fine.
You're telling me that Nicolas Jackson could have got away with a couple things here because
Well,
he was about ready.
Enzo, actually, to go back to Maresca did a great job of going
He
around his
did.
players. He did a really good job. He was really forceful with them, getting them out of the way, because that would have killed the celebrations for Chelsea slightly. Had Jackson, even though he didn't get on the pitch, gone and slapped someone, or had Cucurella or whoever else gone and done something silly and ended up getting a red card afterwards, or actually landing themselves in a load of trouble, it would have taken a tinsy bit of shine off. And also the narrative would have changed around it too. You wouldn't be reading and seeing only pictures of celebration and glory. You'd also be reading words and pictures, seeing pictures of about what went wrong at the end. And he made sure that didn't happen. So fair play to him on that. Jackson gave it a go, didn't he? As only Jackson always does, even if he's not involved in the game. I mean, look, there's two ways of looking at it as well. It's good to see them standing up for each other. Do you remember, was it Man U away, that famous game? Was it Lampard or Pochettino? I'm lost in memory a little bit, where no one backed someone up. And
Yeah,
it was I can't remember who wasn't backed up. Was it Palmer not backed up or somebody else not backed up? And now they do back each other up. Levi's always quick to back them up. Reece comes in backing them up. Jackson goes about it probably the wrong way. But you do see that collectiveness now, which is good to see. But it's all a little bit fisticuffs. But Enrique totally lost the plot for kind of 10 seconds or so.
Let's quickly talk about Cole Palmer, who, I think goes off the boil from like January to April. 31 goals and assists on the season, if you count the Club World Cup, which the club clearly are. I think that puts him at 71 in 2 seasons at Chelsea, if my math is all together. So thereabouts, even if that's not the exact number. Didn't have the easiest season. I think went through a bit of a tough patch. Plays 2 pretty incredible finals.
Yeah.
Back.
Well, don't forget as well, also last summer, he made a massive impact in a final as a substitute for England in the Euros final, and scored a goal that almost got England back in it, or did get England back in it. To do so, 3 finals on the trot, just been unbelievable. That is a really good sign, because I always think with these players, and I actually wrote a piece about it at the back end of last season, in the end of the Premier League run, and I wrote a piece like, now is the time for Cole to really show up. He didn't quite do it in the Premier League season. He was playing, don't get me wrong, he was playing well, but I was hoping he would get like some big goal or big moment at the end of the Premier League season. That didn't quite come. But then, wow, he made the Conference League final his own. Astonishing display. No matter what you say about the competition or the opposition, still astonishing display. And then that final against that opposition and those 2 goals, just unbelievable. And I think it bodes really well, because I do think you can get to a certain, clearly Cole is a certain level of player above most players. He's a special player. But then to get from being that special player to a really elite player, I do think that the knack is of doing it in the big moments and really turning it on in the big moments. And it's something in the past that's been levelled against Harry Kane, of not scoring in finals and not actually doing it at the very biggest moments. So for Cole now, for 3 finals, including the England final, to score, take over a final and have the final he did against Paris Saint-Germain, I think it shows that he can move, or has moved, whichever way you want to look at, into that really elite bracket of being able to do it when you've got to do it. The pressure's on. You're the guy. They're sitting you on top of the Empire State Building or whatever it was. Your picture's plastered everywhere. You take
scary
all
good,
this,
Matt. He's scary good. Come on.
And there's a reason why they're doing this around you, because you're the guy who's meant to deliver, and it puts a lot of pressure on their shoulders. But that's why, people want to be that guy, and he looks like he is that guy. It's a phenomenal performance, phenomenal sort of run now in finals for him, which is good, very good for Chelsea. I was interested as well in one of his quotes where he seemed to suggest that he'd also had a hard time off the pitch. He said he'd had a hard time on and off the pitch. Don't think we've ever heard that before off the pitch. Obviously, we don't know what that is alluding to, whether it's anything other than just the difficulty of not scoring and finding that difficulty, or whether other things were going on. But I think that just shows you there was a bit more than just a dip in form. Obviously, something was happening. So that was very interesting as well. And, just what a player. I even see now for the first time, because I wrote a piece about this ages ago, that he was Manchester City's biggest ever blunder. And, Pep needs to actually own up to this rather than trying to claim it was a good deal for everyone. Ho, ho. And I used to get so much stick off City fans over that piece. And I finally, after the final against PSG, saw some big City accounts starting to say, man, we messed up. We really messed up. Yeah.
I think the off the field thing, it's probably not a coincidence that Tosin has been like his bodyguard in a lot of ways throughout this process. And I like their relationship is very obvious for anyone who wants to see it as teammates. I mean, I think Tosin's been at the ripe old age of 26 or 27,
yeah, exactly.
like the quote unquote uncle of the group for everybody. But I think there's a certain hey, no one's getting through to Cole if I'm not going to let them get through to Cole, and I think that is probably a good thing for him as we move forward, because there's going to be more ups and downs for him. He's going to reach crazy highs because of his talent and his ability to not let the moment get to him, which is that's a talent as well, just to remain calm in these difficult situations, to do 3 feints and then put the goal past. I just, but he's also going to struggle again too. I mean, every great player goes through their own hero's journey.
He will going to need it. Exactly. The pressure on him and the expectation of him is such that if he has, 1 or 2 quiet games, that becomes, if he has 1 or 2 quiet games, I'll be writing about it. Everyone will be writing about it. Everyone will be talking about it. That is the amount. That's the expectation and the pressure that comes with doing what he's already done. Obviously, as well, a new challenge in the Champions League. So a lot of people are going to be judging him on his Champions League performances. I mean, if you remember with Eden Hazard, it was a thing with Eden Hazard at Chelsea. We were waiting for the big Champions League performance for a long, long time with Eden Hazard. He would do it in the league and then go a little bit quiet in the Champions League. So that will be something that's talked about until we see a big Cole performance in the Champions League as well. And Chelsea fans won't want to hear this, there will be a time in his career where he has an injury, an injury that actually keeps him out for a month or 2 months or whatever. And again, that will be a challenge that will be down the line for him as well, and how he comes to cope with that when that comes. So there are going to be challenges, there are going to be dips, there are going to be times when people ask questions, but he's come through a really prolonged, difficult spell where he wasn't scoring and it just kept going and going and going. And he'd come out and then probably with the PSG game hit one of his highest highs afterwards. So it's shown he can really, really hit back at it. And hopefully it helps him start well. And all the Chelsea players are going to have the added challenge of this weird pre-season they've now got and how that impacts them. And quite frankly, it's impossible to predict how that'll turn out.
I mean, last thing before we dive into the transfers here, how do you think, take away the winning of the Club World Cup, the gold badge, all that sort of stuff, but how do you think this performance, the PSG performance, changes expectations for Chelsea ahead of this season?
Externally, it will change them a lot. Internally, it won't change a thing, and I know that for a fact. So internally, it will not change expectation. I'm told, and I've written a piece about this that's going out later today, the expectation for next season, at the start of the season, expectations change during the season. But at the start of the season, the expectation is for Chelsea to remain in the top 4 and improve. That is the expectation. They are not starting the season with the expectation of we must win the title or we must challenge all season for the title. Obviously, if come March, April, they're top of the league by 6 points or something, the expectation of the goal changes. But at the start of the season, the expectation will be top 4. This match and this win, I am assured, will not change that on the back of one result. And it shouldn't. It can't. That would be crazy. The external expectation will be completely different. Now, I don't expect them to challenge for the title. That's not my expectation of them. But I've seen that Jacob Steinberg has already written that they're title challengers for next season. You will see a lot of this from pundits, I think, in the coming weeks of predictions of Chelsea should now challenge, Chelsea have a squad to challenge Chelsea. That will put a different pressure on them. But internally, the expectation and the sort of the main goal, as it were, will not have changed at all.
All right. Well, why don't we shift gears? Obviously, a lot commercially. Chelsea get roughly 90 million pounds. We won't know if this is going to impact the books this year or next year until we actually see the books, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird,
Yeah.
Just use your best discretion sort of a rule that they have going on. Do you have a guess in which year Chelsea will apply this 90 million, or is it just completely?
No, I'm confused by it, if I'm honest with you. I before the tournament, I assumed it would be in next year's, but then I was told that's not told by anyone at the club. I was just told by people who know about these things that assumption's not necessarily correct. So quite frankly, I don't know. Like you say, when we see the accounts, we know it'll turn up in either next year's or the year after or the year just gone or whatever. I don't know. But it'll turn up and it'll be a good thing for them. And it covers some holes. It also covers some holes. When people talk about, it's about 85 million pounds. When people talk about them getting this, remember, there's a few little shortfalls to make up. So there's a shortfall from not having the front of shirt sponsor. So that'll plug that gap that they got sort of gambled on, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a minute. It will also plug a much smaller gap in that they're not doing a preseason tour, which they'd normally do and make money on. So there's a little gap to plug there. There will be bonuses to pay out of it. There's wage increases of about 20% across the board for qualifying for the Champions League. Clearly, this money will be very helpful, and clearly it will only positively impact the books. But it will also plug some gaps. It's not all just like sort of free money, as it were.
You mentioned front of shirt sponsor, and I think just like broader other commercial opportunities out of this final. If Chelsea can't do it now, will it ever happen? I think is the question. In the best position they've been in for 3 years to really capitalize on commercial opportunities. Any news, any timeline that you're hearing on any of this stuff? Because it does have a huge impact on what Chelsea can do in the market.
So I'm told the expectation is that in the coming season, there will be a new long-term front of shirt sponsor. Whether it's for the start of the season is probably touch and go because there's not long left. And they clearly were not going to enter into final stage negotiations while they could become world champions, because that's obviously goes into the negotiation. So my guess would be it won't be for the start of the season, but I haven't been told it won't be for the start of the season. But I am told the expectation is there will be a new front of shirt, long sleeve deal for the company to have its logo emblazoned on at some point next season once they can sort of finalise it. I'm told they're in talks now with about 7 to 10 very large global companies. I'm told that this time last year, because I specifically asked this, I said, look, what was the situation this time last year? Had you accepted a deal this time last year? What are we talking? So I'm told that this time last year, the club was in talks with 2 fairly big companies who were both looking to do long-term deals at around the 40 million a year mark. We're now talking about Chelsea holding out for as much as sort of 60 million a year. So assuming that when they do announce it, it will be a 4 to 5 whatever year deal. Had they have signed one last year, they could have left about 100 million on the table, basically, from what they can get now. So, look, they will say it wasn't a gamble because they believed, Chelsea will say it's not a gamble because they believed in their sporting structure and the fact that they would qualify for the Champions League and be in a much better position. That's why they did it. So they would claim that is not a gamble. I would counter by saying it was still a gamble because had it all gone wrong on the final day against Nottingham Forest, you'd be in a very different position now. But they're not, and they're in a much better position. So what I call a gamble looks like it will pay off pretty handsomely to the tune of probably whatever their front of shirt sponsor they clinch will be worth over the course of it, probably 100 million more than what it would have been if they'd have jumped at one this time last year. And that does some this Chelsea ownership up because they don't care so much about the optics and the public reaction to starting a season again with no front of shirt sponsor, and the fact that, clearly I'll write about it, we'll discuss it, people will debate it. It looks a little bit tin pot. It doesn't look befitting of a club. They don't really care about all that. And, it's kind of it looks like it's worked for them in this instance. I mean, it's taken a little bit of time to get there, but if they do get a 4 to 5 or even longer year deal with a huge company on about 60 million a year, they'll have won a lot of money off holding off for a year. And obviously, and what they will also argue is the 40 million that they could have got last year on front of shirt sponsor, that's why I say gaps being plugged. Less than half of the money they've just won at the Club World Cup has made up for that. So, they haven't even really lost that money in the end.
Yeah, one man's calculated risk is another man's gamble.
Exactly.
That's what it is. So I mean, all of this really matters, right? When you look at the books, obviously Chelsea are entering into the Champions League that has a different set of financial rules and regulations than the Premier League. We went through that a couple episodes ago. So if you want to relive that really cool financial talk experience, go back to the last Matt Law special where we dive into the rules in great detail. Let's quickly talk about, in the last 20 minutes of the show here, the outgoings and the incomings, because now Chelsea are fully in off-season mode for exactly 1 month from today when the Premier League starts, which is fucking crazy, and I don't even know what to think about it. So just going through position by position here and just going through let's play the odds again. Let's do greater than 50%, less than 50%, just to make it as easy as possible. In the goalkeeping department, there's been some significant movement since we last talked. Bettinelli, legend of the club, gone to City.
To win things.
I know. Well, we'll see. Kepa to Arsenal to back up David Raya.
To not win things.
Well, there's that. Georgi Petrovic hasn't been officially announced, but very certainly going to Bournemouth on a roughly £25 million deal. Yeah, I think a pretty good move for him. There was rumor that he might go to Sunderland. I think that would have been a tougher situation for sure. But this is, I think the minute he wasn't a part of the Club World Cup squad, pretty evident that the club were going to try and move him this summer. Yeah. So not a massive shock there, I don't think.
Yeah. No, not a massive shock at all. It was clear that it was also clear he wanted to go. It is true that he ended up not wanting to go to the Club World Cup because he decided that he wasn't going to be first choice, and therefore he wanted to basically find another club. The Chelsea had a kind of a gentleman's agreement with him since the loan at Strasbourg that if he were to go, it would be around 25 million. That's because they haven't had to pay everything within that first deal. That's more than doubled what they paid out for him. So from pure accountancy and business point of view, I think he arrived in the 2023, didn't he? So in sort of 2 years to more than double him with him playing kind of one half season or so. It's got to be good business, whether you like it from a sporting perspective or not. It's good business. And Chelsea are actually proving themselves really good sellers from that perspective, actually. And I do think that one thing that is getting overlooked, I kind of wrote about it a little bit last week, is what their wage structure does in terms of keeping the basics quite low with young players, is it broadens the market for their players massively, because everybody wants young players these days. Like, so many teams are scared to buy old players. Look at Villa trying to sell, or not trying to sell, but look at Villa with Ollie Watkins and Emi Martinez. Two players where you say they should be able to sell them if they need the money or they want the money. But because of their ages and because of their wages, they are actually finding it really tough to. Chelsea's thing with the young players, keeps the market open in terms of age, but also on the salaries, broadens the market out hugely, because the other problem top 5, top 6 clubs have is that no one can afford their players. So, they want to sell people, but now, like, the Italian market's bombed and the Spanish market's bombed a bit, there's just not the clubs to buy anybody's players. But Chelsea, because the actual basic salaries are relatively low in comparison to a lot of clubs of similar esteem, Arsenal, 55 million for Madueke looks quite a lot for Arsenal to pay. But in terms of the overall package with the wages, I think that will be very attractive to Arsenal, because the wages are relatively low in comparison to a lot of other players in that ilk. So
he was only on like 70,000 a week at Chelsea, I think.
I mean, that's what people say. We never really know, but
he wasn't making 300 a week.
Well, he can't have been, because they bought him from PSV. And, players aren't earning fortunes in Holland, and he hadn't really done anything before the PSV. So we know that he can't have come in on a huge wage.
Right.
It keeps the market open for them massively. So in terms of wanting to keep bringing in money and having assets that they can sell, that does help them a lot. And I think that's been missed a little bit because they don't struggle to sell players. They really don't, not like some other teams.
This has been the bane of every other rival club's existence, is that Chelsea buy a lot of players, but also sell a lot of players. And rival clubs really do struggle to do that. I mean, the rest of the goalkeeper room, we talked before the Club World Cup, there's obviously a lot of Mike Maignan talk and Robert Sanchez or Petrovic going, Jorgensen going on loan. It looks like Penders is now going to go to Strasbourg on loan. What happens with the goalkeeper room? Is it the same exact goalkeeper room as last year? Chelsea back in the market at the end? Like, where do you see that going?
It's probably the hardest one to accurately judge. I still think if an opportunity were to come up, and I don't really see where that opportunity is, if I'm honest with you, but there might be something I'm not seeing. But if an opportunity were to come up, the fact they had a go at Maignan will forever make me think that if an opportunity comes up, they will certainly consider it. I do think I've been critical of Sanchez, and I have said several times if Chelsea want to achieve what they are going to achieve, what they want to achieve, then they need to sort of upscale their first choice goalkeeper. But he ended the Premier League season really strongly, and he's just had a fantastic Club World Cup and Club World Cup final in particular. And there is an argument to say he deserves to start the season now. He deserves to be able to prove that Maresca's learned a bit more about him in terms of how he should play with him, that maybe he's matured a little bit in terms of how he will play. There is a strong argument that he deserves to start next season now, although you would still be a little bit wary of it, that you could get yourself stuck with a first choice goalkeeper who ends up not being quite at the level, particularly in the Champions League. I still think if there's an opportunity there, they'll look at it. But I also don't think they'll be trying to force it. And as I say, Sanchez could probably come up with a fairly good argument as to why he should now get to start the season. I was actually talking to a manager. I'll tell this story a little bit if you've got a bit of time. I went to have a chat with a manager about 2 weeks ago because I had a little bit of time to actually get around and meet people and talk to people. And this manager's got quite a good reputation with goalkeepers. And I brought Sanchez up with him. And he said he's a really interesting goalkeeper because he said what he does is he said in his opinion, he will save you more points than he will cost you because he's prepared to almost risk his own sort of reputation in terms of how he approaches saves. So he used the example that when he watches Sanchez, most goalkeepers will always keep their near post very, very tight because they know basically that pundits and critics, if you get beat at your near post, you're going to get killed. Goalkeepers can never get beat at their near post. This person was saying to me, if you watch him, of all the goalkeepers, he will leave more room at the near post than most because he will set himself that he can actually save more goals going into the far corner, and he will back himself that he can still save at the near post, even if it means he does let the odd one in. And in this manager's opinion, he was on board with it. He was saying, I actually think that he does save so many going to the far corner that other goalkeepers couldn't save because they'll play it safe on their near post. And he was saying he is a strange goalkeeper in a way, but he will take risks that will cost him his reputation, but potentially win more points than they lose. He did admit that the short game passing would cause him heart attacks if he was his manager. But I just found it a very interesting analysis of him, and I haven't gone through it and looked at it myself, but he does get beat at his near post probably a little bit more than a lot of people would like. And yet maybe it's correct that he saves more to the far post. But he's unorthodox in a lot of ways. He also does that weird Superman dive punch for crosses that I never like very much. But, he's done really well. Like, he deserves some praise because he has done really well at the back end of last season and in the Club World Cup. And he's done it against a backdrop of some pretty fierce criticism and doubts. And we should probably remember the Mark Cucurella redemption arc in all this, because Cucurella was someone who got booed by a small section of his own fans at one stage and then came back to be one of Chelsea's best and most important players.
That is correct. What do you think happens with Jorgensen? Is it really dependent on Sanchez, or do you think Jorgensen's pretty locked into the two now that Petrovic and Penders are likely out?
Yeah, I think he's locked into the number two, and I think the Penders going out on loan would suggest that Maresca's maybe looked at him in training. Clearly, they think he's an outstanding elite talent. Like, you'll never hear anyone say anything other than him around the club. But it feels like he's spent some time with him and probably thought he needs some first team football on loan. He doesn't need to just be sitting on the bench. And is he actually ready to, if Sanchez gets injured or whoever's number one gets injured, is he ready to just come in and have that pressure on him in a season when you're trying to combine Champions League and Premier League? And it feels like he's probably thought not quite. I'd be very surprised now if it's not Jorgensen number two, because if they were to get a new goalkeeper, I think they'd have to sell Sanchez. I don't think you can demote Sanchez to number two now. I think if they were to bring in a goalkeeper, that means Sanchez has to leave. So I think Jorgensen is probably locked in at number two in any scenario now.
Yeah. Defense, a few movements potentially here. Obviously, we talked a little bit before the tournament about your kind of like fourth, fifth center back spot, which is a really interesting place for Chelsea. But Benoit Badiashile has recently come out and said he's going to be staying at Chelsea next season, that he hopes to write more history. And Maresca did give him some decent minutes in the tournament as well, which would kind of give me confidence. Trev Chalobah obviously starts the final, plays incredibly well in the final. But it was, there's a lot of rotation at center back and throughout the tournament. I mean, Levi missed through suspension, so it was a Tosin Trev semifinal against Fluminense that looked really good. Obviously, West Fofana is still back at home, kind of recovering from his injury at the end of last season, which means that you have a Axel Disasi, you have a little bit of Renato Vega, you have a Ben Chilwell, sort of situation. Any movement that you're hearing about for some of the not core group?
Disasi has a fair bit of interest, I think, both overseas and at home. He must, I'm told he's a very good character in dressing rooms, and I'm also told that as an actual centre-back, his data and everything is pretty good. People like him as a centre-back. It's obviously, if you get hooked into this, having him as a hybrid and potentially playing at right back. So I think there are a lot of teams who would look at him as a centre-back and still be interested. So I'm pretty confident that Disasi will get a club and that they will actually sell Disasi. Chilwell is a tricky one. He's obviously on a very high contract from previous it wasn't previous regime, because the new regime gave him the contract that he's on because he got an extension, but he's a trickier one. Palace, I think Palace have just signed a left back, which would seem to cut off a return to Palace route. So I'd imagine that would be a late in the window, and you'd have to think more likely a loan than anything else. Look, I don't think, I'm pretty sure that none of this will have changed the outlook to the window. So therefore, I still think the club will be open to a left-sided defender who might be able to cover at left back, or certainly cover on the left. Badiashile says he's staying and he wants to stay. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't mean if a bid comes in that Chelsea don't look at it, and once the club look at it, then a player's decision can change somewhat, because you're told a different thing. So I think a little bit of a wait and see on Badiashile, but they're not going to be, desperate to sell him or panicking if they haven't, because like you say, Maresca's shown a little bit of faith in him. And I think starting the final will have been really important to Chalobah's mindset. I think playing in a final against PSG, albeit people will say, well, some might question the sort of Club World Cup and stuff. A lot of those players will have been looking towards that final and the starting lineup, thinking, this is going to really tell me something about where I am with the coach here. Does he really trust me? We're about to go against this team who, on their day, and if we get it wrong, could demolish us. Does he really, really trust me to step up? And given what Trev's been through with Chelsea and the ups and the downs in terms of how he's been viewed, I think it would be a big thing for his mindset and confidence from the coach and the club that he got selected for the final. And then obviously, as Trev always does so well. So I still think there's There's definitely still some interest from Napoli in Trev. I still think there might be bids that make Chelsea think about it, but it is a lot different to previously. They're certainly not putting him around. They're certainly not saying he's for sale. They're certainly not encouraging bids. They're certainly not making bids for other players and talking about, well, what about Chalobah? Sort of, do you fancy buying Chalobah? None of that at all. If something develops on Chalobah, it'll be because a team makes a bid that Chelsea actually decide they have to think about. And you'd imagine that would have to be a very high bid now. I mean, what would you price him at the moment? He's still got a long time on his contract. We used to talk about kind of 25 million for Chalobah, but I mean, that would be massively undervaluing. You'd want over 40 million for him now, wouldn't you?
Not in this market. No way.
Yeah.
No
He's
way.
just made his England debut as well. It seems pretty certain that he'll continue to be part of the England setup under Tuchel, probably. So, yeah, he's really added a lot of value. I hope he doesn't go. I really hope he doesn't go. If he goes this time, it will be his choice, though, rather than the club's choice.
Renato Vega seemingly on the way out.
Vega will be on the way out. It's just a case of what kind of deal. A lot of European clubs like Vega. He's clearly got an appeal. Another one where he could easily leave and make them a profit, and a bit like slightly different to Petrovic, because Petrovic played more and stuff, but it'll be one where maybe when he leaves permanently, you look at it and you go, actually, sporting wise, may not have done an awful lot for the squad, but business wise and model wise and accounting wise, it's worked out pretty smartly.
Midfield, you still see Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, Karni Chukwuemeka, Leslie Luchukwu. I believe Mateus Samugu is going to go to Strasbourg permanently.
Yeah, that's already agreed. Yeah.
Yep. Amari Kellyman probably gets a loan this year. Anything else from the midfield that you're looking at? It's a little bit of a tighter group right now.
Yeah, I mean, Chukwuemeka is an interesting one. Chelsea always value him really highly in terms of their asking price. I'm told at the moment Borussia just can't and won't meet the asking price on Chukwuemeka. So whether the asking price comes down at any stage to help a permanent deal, or whether it's a loan again, or whether it has to be somewhere other than Borussia. Clearly Borussia want him. Clearly he's keen on Borussia. But at the moment, the asking price Borussia won't pay. So that's stuck a little bit. Dewsbury Hall's really interesting, because I'm pretty sure I came on here a few weeks ago and said, 100% Dewsbury Hall will go. Actually, he's kind of worked out as a really useful squad player for them. I'm starting to doubt myself on that a little bit and wonder whether he's really handy to have around the squad, particularly for those domestic cup games and things like that. Look, if they got a good bid, if they got what they considered a good bid for Dewsbury Hall, clearly they'd sell him. I just don't know. At the moment, I haven't heard word of a bid coming in from him. But he has been involved in the Club World Cup. It's a little bit tricky on some of the lads who've been involved in the Club World Cup, because clearly nothing was really going to happen around them while they're away. But Chukwuemeka, that one's stuck a little bit. Kellyman, you're right, will have to be a loan. And yeah, Amugu has gone back to Strasbourg. Another very difficult negotiation, no doubt.
Well, tireless even. Incredibly difficult. The forward area, I think, was probably the area where, outside of goalkeeper, that we were getting the most kind of questions, comments, concerns about. Obviously, Nicolas Jackson not having, the best end of the season, the best Club World Cup. A lot of rumors with Joao Pedro coming in, looking the business that, Liam Delap's been all right so far for Chelsea. That Jackson now kind of enters into a weird place where there was a little competition. Now there's a lot of competition, and he's out of favor. So, I mean, what do you think happens with him?
I think he could go. I mean, I've said for a while I thought Jackson could go, and it's obviously only that feeling's getting stronger. I think his situation is similar to Madueke in that they're not trying to sell him. They'd quite like to keep him and have him in that rotation, because clearly it would make for a very strong rotation. And clearly they know there's a big talent there, and they don't want to give that away easily. But that was how they felt on Madueke, and Madueke is about to be confirmed as an Arsenal player. So if a club comes in seriously for Jackson, I think they will definitely look at it. There aren't that many players who are untouchable at Chelsea. Cole obviously is, Moises is, Levi is, Reece is. But there's also, in terms of the squad, there's a lot of players where, because of their model that they have, they will always look at it. And they're not run by pride or ego, so they don't really care that Jackson was signed 2 years ago, and some people might find it a little bit silly if he's sold in 2 years. They don't care about that. And it's kind of paying off for them a little bit, that attitude. So I think Jackson could go. And, he has gone from being pretty much the only striker to the third choice striker. We'll hear a lot about João Pedro as a versatile forward, which he is, and he can play in different positions. But let's face it, they've bought Jamie Gittins. They've got Pedro Neto, who was arguably player of the tournament at the Club World Cup. They've got Cole, and Nkunku's still at the club. He'll probably go. But João Pedro is not going to get a lot of minutes anywhere other than striker. We saw in that final, it was João Pedro starting as striker, Liam Delap coming on. That looks like quite a set thing between the two of them. Nicolas Jackson will feel like he's third choice at the moment, and he kind of is third choice. And those red cards against Newcastle in the Club World Cup have been very costly to him in the pecking order, I feel, and the trust. And also, I know that I think he has felt strange at the Club World Cup, because what Maresca does is when a player isn't really available to the team as such, he doesn't involve him in any of the prep. So in training, you kind of get left out to the side in a little group to work while they do the real prep with the team players.
Okay.
Jackson obviously was suspended during the Club World Cup and at the end of last season. So he spent a little bit of time in training, probably feeling like he's a bit on the outside.
Yeah.
I'm told it's definitely not a personal thing, so I'm told this has happened to other players. But Jackson, having been the only striker who's always basically, if he's available, guaranteed to play. So then, you're suspended, but you're not really going to train with us now. You're going to do this over here, and our two new guys are over here, and we're all training together, and everyone's, there'll be stuff going on in his head, whether it's justified or not. But yeah, I think we'll continue to hear speculation about Nicolas Jackson.
I mean, the people want to know, is Nicolas Jackson going to go to Villa? Is Morgan Rogers going to come to Chelsea, Matt? What's your assessment? Come on.
So I'm not told by anyone at Chelsea, but I'm told by people on the outside that if Villa do go for Nicolas Jackson, it will immediately trigger a bid for Morgan Rogers from Chelsea. So if Villa, the only way I see Villa going for Nicolas Jackson potentially is if Ollie Watkins goes, because I just don't, with us not in the Champions League next season, I don't see a scenario where we carry a Nicolas Jackson along with Ollie Watkins. So first of all, you're waiting to see what happens with Ollie, and the market for Ollie is shrinking with Arsenal going for Gyökeres now and really making some progress there. Newcastle making big progress on Ekitike. The market seems to be shrinking a bit around Ollie. And my guess at the moment is he'll end up staying at Villa. But if Ollie goes, then I think Jackson and Villa becomes a possibility. Obviously, Unai has worked with him, likes him, kind of promoted, Nicolas Jackson in many ways, didn't want to sign another striker, wanted to give him a go and bring him up from the youth ranks. But I am told that were Villa to actually put in a bid for Jackson, then that would immediately trigger a counter bid from Chelsea for Morgan Rogers, which no Villa fan would want to hear. I don't really see Chelsea going hard on Rodgers without that scenario, because I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I just think that they've got to create space, and they've also got to be. They've still got to be careful with their funds. Morgan Rogers is going to cost any club who wants to sign him, the best part of £80 million.
Yeah.
So you need a kind of 60 or something coming in for Nicolas Jackson the other way to do that, to really spark that. So I think Chelsea's interest in Rodgers is probably quite connected to whether Villa end up going for Jackson. Clearly, Emery's a fan of Jackson. Interestingly, with Madueke going, I do think there's very much a door open for another winger coming in. I wrote a piece a while ago that Chelsea want as many as 9 players competing for the attacking rotation. You take Madueke out, there's still kind of 9 with Tyreek George there, but I think there's a good chance Tyreek George might go out on loan. They could go with 8, but you've got to imagine Nkunku will end up going as well. So it feels like there's still space for definitely one more winger to come in at Chelsea before the end of the window. And depending on who else goes, they might also go for another player who can play across the attacking and, in that sort of Morgan Rogers mould.
Any names?
So, well, the wingers, we know about the winger targets because they had 3 winger targets in Gittins, Garnacho, and Malik Fofana, and they've signed one of them in Gittins. So if they bring in another winger, at the moment, you'd have to say it would either be Garnacho or Malik Fofana, because they were on their original list. So
the Rodrigo dream is over.
So the Rodrigo thing, I never really saw as a goer. I mean, he is on huge wages and wants even bigger wages to move. I think there'll be there's a massive fear among clubs of the reason he hasn't moved yet. There's a massive fear among European clubs of committing to the sort of money it would take to sign Rodrigo, because if it goes wrong, we talked about Chelsea being able to sell well because their wages are at a certain level and stuff like that. If it goes wrong with Rodrigo, you're stuck with an enormous problem. I mean, Chelsea already have a problem in Sterling this summer. It just doesn't really fit with what Chelsea have been doing well and what Chelsea have had success with to go and sign Rodrigo. So I don't see Rodrigo. I never have. I think if it's a winger, it will be, at the moment, Garnacho or Gittins. And if a forward sort of space is freed up by either an Nkunku or Jackson going, or both, then, if it's Jackson to Villa, watch this space from Morgan Rogers' bid. If it's not Rogers, that I think they must have a few other people on that list who are quite versatile, who they might look at. But they want to end the summer with 8 to 9 first team options in that attacking rotation. Like I say, I think probably Tyreek goes out on loan.
Yeah. You mentioned Nkunku. Is there a market for him? I think he played okay during the Club World Cup.
Yeah, there seems to be a market for him. I mean, Enzo's played a blinder there in the Club World Cup, actually putting some faith in him, playing him in his favoured position and trying to work to his strengths a little bit rather than just sort of leaving him on the sidelines, because I think that's probably reignited a little bit of an interest in him. Bayern Munich, we know, definitely like him. Bayern Munich are having to reassess because of Musiala's injury. It seems now Bayern, before they do anything else, are going to get some sort of winger, whether that be Simmons or whether they go in for Eze. I think Simmons is probably more likely. And then they might look again at what they were already looking at, and Nkunku might fall into that. Man United have liked Nkunku in the past. I still think there is a scenario, again, a bit like the Jackson-Rogers scenario. I still think there's an Nkunku-Garnacho scenario that potentially could come up with United. And yeah, Nkunku's got a market. I mean, it would slightly depend on Chelsea's valuation of him, but Nkunku's definitely got a market.
Guiu still looking likely to go to Ipswich, as far as you know?
Guiu, all I know for sure is Guiu on loan somewhere. I've seen Ipswich linked. That looks like a clever link because obviously they have a gap after Delat. They'll like the way Kieran McKenna plays. We know that they wanted to. Well, I say they wanted to appoint Kieran McKenna. McKenna was on their list before they appointed Maresca. So they appreciate the way he plays football. So Guiu going to Ipswich makes an awful lot of sense. But certainly Guiu out on loan, yeah.
And then what do you do with Raheem Sterling?
Oh, I do not know. I do. I mean, all I can imagine is that we'll have a scenario come the end of the transfer window where he goes out on loan and Chelsea end up picking up a lot of the tab, like United did with Sancho, like United did in January with Rashford, like Chelsea did with Sterling to Arsenal. I still think that the big plus for clubs here with players like Sterling is that there are 3, I think, Premier League games before the transfer window shuts. And I think that's where a player like Sterling gets his move, because in those 3 Premier League games at the start of the season, there will be a club where either they have an injury that really messes up their whole strategy, whether a new signing gets injured or whether someone they were basing everything around gets injured, and all of a sudden they're left in a panic mode. A club that happens to could make a late move on Sterling, or a club who just has a horrible start to the season, like loses the first 3 games or something, and there's pressure on, and they need to get something in and get someone who they feel could spark something. I think it will be right in that last element of the window that something happens on Sterling, and there'll be a club who have got an injury, who have got a horrible bit of form, and they need to spark out, because there will still be people who believe they can get something out of Sterling. And it'll all be about the wages. And the only way you will get a good deal with Chelsea on the wages is to leave it very late. If you go to Chelsea now and try and take Sterling on loan, Chelsea aren't going to agree to pick up, 60, 70% of his wages. But if he's still at Chelsea with 4 days to run of the transfer window, then frankly, they won't have a lot of choice but to do that. I don't, I've been consistently told absolutely not to Saudi. MLS, I don't really know where the club is out in the MLS, but MLS I could see Sterling in America, but certainly not in Saudi. But yeah, it's probably going to be a deal where Chelsea end up paying for the deal quite a lot, rather than suddenly finding someone who pays them money or takes on his whole wages.
Anything with Joao Felix to close?
See, obviously the Benfica thing has been widely touted. I'm told, I don't know what the clubs, you're going to ask me the clubs, I don't know. I'm told the interest extends past Benfica. I'm kind of praying it doesn't include Aston Villa, because we always seem to get linked with Joao Felix. And no offence, Joao, but I really don't want to see you end up at Villa Park. Sorry. But I am told the interest extends outside Benfica. He clearly quite fancies a return to Benfica. I feel a bit his career arc and what he's sort of gone through movement-wise, I do feel a bit sorry for the lad. I've actually interviewed him back in the day, and he's a nice guy. He's a nice lad, and
yeah,
so
we have to. Yep.
Yeah, he is a nice guy, and from my experience of him, I've always found him to be quite humble, quite nice. Deserves a bit of a break. The one thing I am told is that he's on less at Chelsea than people think he's on. That we know that he fit in with their wage model when he moved last season. I'm told it's actually less than people think, and that does keep a market open for him, because his wages, I'm told, would fit into a lot of wage brackets and keep a lot of options on the table. It's then about the deal in terms of permanent or loan and what you can do around a deal, and also just getting some confidence that you're not going to sign. That AC Milan loan was disastrous for him. I don't think his Chelsea form was disastrous, actually. He was just like, he didn't fit in. And actually, when you look back last season, in the first half of the season when he did play, there were a lot of good performances in the Conference League. Bad standard, I know. And playing against Southampton and Ipswich, and he ripped them apart and stuff. He wasn't awful at Chelsea. But What happened was he went to AC Milan and he was awful. And the Italian media killed him. And that's caused a real problem to Chelsea and Joao. If he'd have not had that Milan loan, I think on the back of the Chelsea stuff, actually, you'd be making an argument, decent pickup for someone, probably, and cheaper than normal. But that Milan loan has been horrible for him.
Yeah. Well, let's close there. There's going to be a lot of moves that are going to happen over the next. I think we are now in the 45-day territory before the end of the transfer window.
Liverpool played their first preseason game of the season at the weekend. Villa start there. Villa have got 2 preseason games this week. It feels so bizarre and such a head F that we're talking like Chelsea season has just finished, and yet everyone else is starting. It's so weird.
We're about to do our season review next week, so it's classic stuff here at the London.
And then the following week, the season preview.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. It's coming quick. But look, Matt, I think the people will have enjoyed this one. It's been a lot of fun to kind of reconnect after a very eventful month for Chelsea Football Club, and for everyone who submitted questions on Discord, just thank you. I tried to cover as much ground there as humanly possible. I think they will enjoy the Jackson Rodgers discussion, as that featured highly in our Discord. But look, Chelsea fans, give Matt a follow and a like for this one. Of course, subscribe on YouTube. We're doing good numbers over there this summer. And we will be back into your feeds many, 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 many times over the next month and a half. But until then, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.